In this short lecture, I'm going to provide a bit of an overview of strength-based practice, which is an important foundation for this course. At a very basic level, strength-based practice focuses on strengths, abilities, and potential rather than problems, deficits, and pathologies. In other words, we start with the strengths of individuals, families, and communities rather than the problems they face. This isn't to say that we ignore problems or challenges, but our approach to them starts with what is already working and builds on their strengths. If we think of the metaphor of a half-full glass, a strength-based approach focuses on the half-full part of the glass. The half-empty glass represents a notion that individuals, families, and communities are deficient and have needs. The half-full glass represents a notion that individuals, families, and communities have many strengths, skills, and talents. A strength-based approach argues that it is the half-full glass that gives us something to work with. Strength-based approaches are built on the recognition that if we ask people to look for deficits, they will usually find them, and their view of situations will be coloured by this. If we ask people to look for successes, they'll usually find them, and their view of situations will be coloured by this. What do you see here? You might want to pause the video while you have a closer look. Do you see a series of shapes? Maybe a hat on its side, an arrow, a factory, or characters from the 1980s computer game Space Invaders? But maybe you can see a word, and I don't mean the words in What Can You See? If you want to find it for yourself, you might want to pause the video. Now can you see the word fly? What we focus on changes what we see. If we only focus on the black, we will miss out on an important part of the image, and so with strength-based practice. If we don't focus on strengths, we miss out on a really important part of the picture. The part of the picture that can really assist families and communities to create change. There are a number of principles that underpin strength-based approaches to working with families and communities. The following are 8 principles of strength-based practice. The starting point of strengths-based practice is recognizing that all individuals, families, and communities have many strengths and they have the capacity to learn, grow, and change. As already indicated, our focus is on strengths and aspirations rather than what is not working. This can be quite a different approach. A colleague and I used to run workshops for Aboriginal fathers in prison. The fathers often said they were the best workshops they had attended. I suspect that this was largely because of our focus. In prison, many workshops are about what not to do. Don't do drugs, don't do violence, don't do crime. Our workshop, on the other hand, said, wow, aren't fathers incredibly important to kids? So how can you be the kind of fathers you want to be? It set up a very different focus. We could still talk about tough issues, but the context was so different. I want to emphasize again that strengths-based approaches do not mean that we ignore problems. It means that we address the challenges individuals and families and communities face by focusing on their strengths, what they are already doing well, and their hopes for the future. Individuals, families, and communities don't live in vacuums. They are part of a broader community and belong to a variety of social networks. And in every environment, there are individuals, groups, and organisations who have something to give, something that others may want or need. Thus, a strength-based approach encourages service providers to look for and build on the many resources that can be found in a wide range of social environments, including people's extended families, friendship circles, and a local community, rather than just relying on welfare and specialist support organisations. At times, external professional services are needed, but they should be a last resort, and, where possible, they should be introduced in ways that complement and enhance local resources. The language and words we use and the questions we ask change how we see people, situations, and possibilities. They help create reality because how we describe or talk about things shape the perception we and others have of people and contexts, which have a major impact on how we respond to situations and the resulting outcomes. Think of the different perceptions created when we talk about victims of domestic violence compared to survivors of domestic violence, or dysfunctional families compared to families facing many challenges, or refugees compared to illegal immigrants. In working with families and communities, think about the difference between saying, "you should," versus "have you considered," or "I know that," versus "could you tell me about?" The language we use is incredibly important. Dennis Saleeby, one of the people credited with articulating strength-based practice, suggests the role of expert or professional may not provide the best vantage point from which to appreciate people's strengths and assets. If we see people as being the experts of their own situations, then it is important that we collaborate and support self-determination. We need to work with families and communities in ways that respect their capacity to make their own decisions. As Week and her colleagues said 30 years ago in the context of social work, it is impossible for even the best trained professional to judge how another person should best live his or her life. The non-judgmental attitude in social work dictates not only that social workers should not judge, but that social workers cannot judge. Instead, the principles of knowing what is best and doing what is best places the power of decision where it should be, with the person whose life is being lived. Empowerment is related to the ability of individuals, families, and communities to have control over their own lives. To be empowered, people need an environment which provides them with options and allows them to make choices. We do not promote empowerment if we act as an expert who knows what is best for the people we work with. We need to recognize people's experience, expertise, and ability to make their own decisions and support them in taking control of their own lives. This can be very challenging, particularly in contexts like working with people who perpetrate family violence or child abuse. Empowering practice means that we need to be aware of the ways in which we exercise power, which I will return to soon. Strength-based practice sees problems and challenges as a result of interactions between people rather than within people. This is a principle that's not as frequently identified in the literature, but it is a useful distinction. In models of family and community work which focus on deficits and pathologies, the problem lies within the person. The person is a problem. These approaches tend to focus on individualistic rather than social environment explanations of human problems. In strength-based practice, problems are seen as a result of interactions between people, organisations, or structures. By focusing on how the interactions contribute to the situation, as well as concentrating on people's strengths, it's easier to avoid blaming the victim. The final principle of strength-based practice I want to discuss is the importance of keeping a commitment to social justice. A major criticism of strength-based practice is that it can be aligned with neoliberal notions of individual responsibility and self-help, and that it ignores structural inequalities. We need to recognise that strength-based practice is not the answer to everything, and we need to not only work with individual families and communities, but also address big social issues which impact on individuals, families, and communities. You may have noticed that this photo was used earlier in the lecture. It's a photo from 2011 of refugees from Libya lining up for food at a transit camp. Did you notice that they are all men? I reuse this slide to remind us that sometimes we also need to address broader issues like why are they refugees and where are the women? If we just focus on strengths, we may miss important underlying causes of injustice. Strength-based practice challenges traditional power relationships. We can differentiate between 4 types of power: power over, power with, power to, and power within. Many traditional ways of working with families and communities are based on power over, where professionals make decisions for others and expect them to comply, for example, through the threat of providing no further support or removing children from their care. Strength-based practice turns this on its head because we focus on the expertise, insights, passions, and priorities of the people we work with. Our approach needs to be grounded in power with, power to, and power within. Strength-based practice does not mean having blind optimism and ignoring problems, needs, and challenges. In a recent Alternatives to Violence Project workshop with parents, around the middle of a 2-day workshop, one of the fathers said, "This workshop is making me realise I'm a better father than some people say I am." At face value, this seems to be a great outcome. But even though we want to increase parents' confidence, there is a potential dark side to this statement. What if he was an abusive parent and there were significant grounds for being concerned about his parenting? What if it was allowing him to deny the need for change? There are real risks involved in accepting this statement without question and not exploring it further. What the father's statement did, however, was allow us to have a conversation in a very different context. It allowed us to discuss what being a good father, dad means, rather than suggesting he was a bad father. Strength-based practice needs to involve more than being positive, encouraging, and hoping for the best. We need to be willing to explore difficult issues, ask challenging questions, and do more than simply accepting statements at face value. I want to finish with this acronym that I think applies well to strength-based approaches. Strength-based approaches are about hope, helping other possibilities emerge. When our focus is on the problems and deficits of families, we can see what needs to change, but we can often see a whole lot of barriers to change, and it can often be really hard to see a way forward. When our focus is on strengths, what is working, and aspirations, we have something to work with, and other possibilities can start to emerge. This is the end of the lecture. The references are listed in Blackboard. And remember, I welcome questions and comments, preferably in Blackboard. All the best with your study.